welcome to the Creepan Podcast. This is Killian. Today we have our local GA representative. Can you please introduce yourself?
I am Ghon Webb, also known as Paul in real life. I'm an NR senator, and I'm mostly representing them more than the GA. The GA would not want to be associated with me very much, I don't think.
Fair enough. How long have you been in the NR?
I'm a weird story. I've been in the NR for basically as long as I've been playing the Combine. I've been here for about 10 years now. This is my 10th year. When I first joined, I joined the Galactic Empire, surprisingly. I spent about a month there going through the academy, and this was back during the Vodo days. It was very big, evil, oppressive empire of menace. This was about just under a year after they'd gone around massacring Wookiees on Kashyyyk and things like that, and quickly decided it wasn't for me. In the academy, they taught me enough to know I didn't want to stay there anymore, and I very quietly moved somewhere else on Naboo, and before they could pick me up and take me away to actually become a proper member of the Empire, I snuck off and joined the Rebel Alliance instead. And I've basically been with the Rebel Alliance and the NR on and off for those 10 years. I take breaks every now and again to go join other factions. I've been in the they were the Anzatan Commonwealth then. They'd stopped being the NAO, they'd become the Anzatan Commonwealth. They were very, very firm on that. I can't believe I've forgotten. I also was in the Jedi Academy, Jedi Order. I've been Jedi Council Master, but now I'm just NR Senator. Honestly, it's the bit that keeps drawing me back. It's the most fun I've had in this game for quite a long time, just sitting around writing laws, fighting with people about politics. I'm strange, I acknowledge that.
Why do you think that is?
The thing that appeals to me the most is after 10 years, most veterans get to the point where they've done everything that they care about, at least. I'm the kind of player who's bored a bit of the Darkness interface or who chafes at the Darkness interface, because I joined at a point in time where Darkness was kind of fresh and new and didn't have the features we expect today. I remember production being implemented and things like that. So things were new and exciting at one point, and then after so many times doing build wars or building tax planets and things like that, you just kind of get bored and you want to do something else. And when it comes to politics, you're not playing with the game anymore. It's not a numbers game. It's playing with people. And people are always different, and you're always playing with a new set of people. It's like having your own little sandbox, and there's always a new kid coming to play with you with a new toy, and everything's a little bit new and different each time. I guess that's why I like politics. It's exciting.
Sounds a little diabolical to me.
Oh, we're not evil. We're the good guys. We keep telling ourselves that.
Can you tell us about the New Republic and some of the challenges that it faces?
I suppose the easy answer would be to say that the biggest challenge the New Republic faces is the New Republic itself. In the Combine, we have a set of rules where you have player conduct rules, you have the limitations of darkness, and within those constraints and within those rules, in the New Republic, we give ourselves extra rules. We create a situation where we have a certain amount of freedom within the game, and we narrow ourselves down based on ethical and moral frameworks. And I struggle to make this sound exciting, but it's really quite interesting if you're nerdy like me. The way that the Empire works is they will often go for efficiency, and that's what they do. And they have this totalitarian ideal that is supported quite strongly by the Darkness interface, where the factions work. So factions have one leader, especially in government factions where the leader and the owner are the same person. In the New Republic, we look at that situation and go, well, that's great and all, we're going to ignore most of it. We have our chief of state, who is the owner and the leader of the government faction, and then we strip away various aspects of overall power and give it to other people who don't have the ability to affect things in darkness, people like me on the Senate. So we take power from the person who effectively can do anything they want to. They can take all the fleets, they can run around with them, they can do whatever they want, and we play a game where people say, okay, he could do that, he's not going to. That's what's great about the New Republic, I think. That's what's fun. There's always this level of danger and zaniness and romanticism, the idea that we are going to do things not because it's the most easy way to get things done, but because if you were living in this world as a living, breathing character, you would kind of like these freedoms. And that's what we try to encapsulate and what we try to do. And that can be a real challenge, because we have problems where we can't run things as effectively as we would like to be able to, because we choose to not be efficient. We strive, I think would be a better word, we strive for justice and righteousness and goodness, and we do the best we can to achieve that.
That sounds a little bit like insanity.
We're a very special kind of crazy.
Why has the NR not been so visible in the public as in the past?
That's a good question, and one that implies that we were ever visible. I say that not to disparage my faction, but it's true. 10 years ago, when they were talking about the Rebel Alliance, they were known as being inactive. The people didn't think that the Rebel Alliance got anything done. And as time has passed, people have got this general perception that everything was better back when the New Republic was the Rebel Alliance. I don't think we've ever really changed. We've always been more of a quiet group. It's true that there have been certain chief of states who were more forward and outgoing in presenting a vision of the NR to the galaxy. I don't think we've ever been particularly good at it. There's a number of reasons for that. It comes down to personal choice from the chiefs of state. It comes down to our diplomatic command. It comes down to some of our laws, which can and do cause issues sometimes. For example, in the NR, we have a law which is called the GNS Act. It requires that any GNS that we post has to go through approval from our High Ambassador and our Director of New Republic Intelligence. It's a stupid law, and I don't know where it came from, and we're currently going through a legal reform where I'm trying to get rid of that completely. What it essentially means is everything has to go to a committee. If the chief of state wanted to write a GNS post about anything, they would have the power to just post it from anywhere they wanted, assuming they had a compops skill high enough. And if they did that, they would be breaking the law. And if anyone did that, they would be breaking the law. There are a number of times when we've had GNS posts that were like beating the GE to the punch on a big story or something like that, and it gets as far as the committee, and the committee finds some reason to not put it through. That's happened to me at least 3 times that I can think of. It's one of these things where we found a thing that doesn't work and now we have to try and fix it. And this one is taking a lot of time.
Why?
I think that an awful lot of people in the New Republic are afraid of the people outside of the New Republic. A lot of people in the New Republic get into a vicious cycle where they think that everyone hates them and that's why they don't want to deal with other people. Whereas I am more of the opinion that people in the galaxy hate me, but that's because I'm a colossal jerk. But I'm willing to go out there and put myself forward and at least say, this is why I do the things I do, this is why we do the things we do.
So why don't you tell us about this current chief of state?
Endaro is, even amongst chief of states who don't necessarily speak out much on a galactic stage, he is quite quiet. What I would say, though, is he is an incredibly good administrator. He was a civilian. He's worked in industry, in our nationalized factions. He was our Minister of Trade and Industry. He was a senator, and then he won our election and became chief of state. He's not necessarily a big presence, but he makes his presence felt, at least in the NR he does. He speaks up. He often stands up to me when I'm being all senatorial, stomping around, being mean, telling people, you can't do this, you must do this. Other than that, he's just very good at organizing the NR so that it keeps chugging forwards.
What is the New Republic's role in the Galactic Alliance?
I'll start off by offending all our allies first, and I'll say that the New Republic is the reason the Galactic Alliance exists. And then I'm going to hopefully make them feel a bit better. It's there to be the juggernaut. We are the reason the Galactic Alliance exists, because this game doesn't function without a galactic empire and some sort of rebel or resistance group fighting them. And any new player who comes in can immediately get their bearings in the universe by going, okay, they're the empire. Okay, not Rebel Alliance, it's year 17, probably makes sense they're a new republic by now. So they can make sense of that. And the GA is kind of our sphere of influence, because people don't just want to flock to these two groups. People want to have the freedom to do things their own way. People want to make little monarchies. They want to try other systems like the Triumvirate Coalition. You have other groups that just function in their own strange ways, like the Krath. They're cool. I like them. Their whole system of balancing light and darkness. They're the bad boys of the group. The whole point is you have to have this dynamic of someone fighting someone else, and the GA is this big extension of being able to draw other groups into this good versus evil fight. And the Galactic Alliance, the New Republic is there. We have the technology. The New Republic technology is the keystone of the Galactic Alliance, just like the Empire's tech is the keystone for the Imperial Union. Unlike the Imperial Union, where the Empire is the main driving force, they're in charge of everything. In the Galactic Alliance, the New Republic, despite having a stranglehold on technology, if you will, we are equal members in the group. Everyone else is allowed to have an equal say in proceedings. The only thing that the people don't have their own say in is how much New Republic technology they get their hands on, because of course that is our prerogative. But everything else is done as a group, and it reaches this point where if the New Republic is a big clunking machine that's going to fall apart at any second, the Galactic Alliance is an even bigger version, which is even more likely to fall apart. If you look at the New Republic and go, well, that looks precarious, you don't want to go anywhere near the Galactic Alliance. Unlike the Imperial Union, which is more of an economic joining of like minds, the Galactic Alliance is devoted to one main thing, really. We have the little constitution, we have the preamble, which is all about bringing democracy and peace. At the end of the day, we're a wartime alliance against the Empire. And the overall goal is to stop them, is to give this galaxy some sort of conflict. The Galactic Alliance is this strange meeting of strange groups. The New Republic, we're kind of like Don Quixote or some other romantic lunatic who is trying to be morally right, morally just, and doing all these crazy things that might not make the most logical sense, but we do them anyway. Then you've got people like Rogue Squadron who are a bit more rowdy, starting fights, hitting people over the heads with bottles. At which point you realize that Kraft, while all this has been going on, has been holding a holdout blaster and is ready to just blow someone away. A bit more cunning. They're just sort of looking a bit shady. And then you've got all these other groups like the Triumvirate Coalition. I imagine they'd just sit there quietly and probably try and talk everyone else down. And they're a good soft beating heart. They are so nice. I spent a year there a few years back, and they are just the nicest people in the world. They are the nicest players, this happy little community, and I really love having them as part of the team because when you have people like Kraft who are always coming up with some sort of plan, or Rogue Squadron who's always seems to be kind of standing off against someone, and people like the NR who's just a tiny bit insane. It's nice having someone who's just there having a good time and trying to make sure everyone else is on the straight and narrow. And then we have our other smaller groups who are just kind of there at the party as well. It's all a really good thing, and it doesn't work all the time because we don't have the enemy to fight. We can't just go out and start smashing the Imperial Union. So sometimes people just break away or they get tired of all the bureaucracy involved, and that's just the way of the game, and things will happen like that. Sometimes that makes it interesting, other times it's heartbreaking, especially when they fly off with a bunch of your home ones. That's a very long and complicated way of me saying that the NR is a place to go for ships and idiocy.
Does the NR have any programs like the GE when it comes to neutral players?
I would say it's kind of about 50-50 there. We don't try to project ourselves as much as the Empire does, which I think is quite fitting for us. We're at this point in the game where we have our systems and we monitor those and mother over those, and they're this bastion of freedom. It makes sense that the Empire would be trying to extend feelers towards neutral groups a bit more than we are. But at the same time, the New Republic isn't necessarily completely insular, because what we do is we cultivate our own private industry. We have this concept called the Private Sector Corporations Act, and we just call them PSAs, they're private sector affiliates. We've had this system for about 7 years now, but not a huge number of people know about it. And what we have is essentially privately owned corporations. These aren't nationalized factions. These are privately owned factions that exist within the NR framework. The members of these factions have voting rights in the New Republic. The factions themselves receive military protection from the New Republic. Some of these factions actually receive New Republic military hardware in order to defend themselves, depending on what kind of faction they are. Right now we have 4 PSAs. We have the Baobab Merchant Fleet, we have Freitech, we have the Medical Circle, and we have the Tyrannel Ferry Corp, formerly known as Shackage. Some of the factions that we have are created by New Republic members who just want to branch out into free industry. Other ones, like Tyrannel Ferry Corporation, they were formed outside of the NR and then joined us, and both methods are appropriate. But we aren't really about sort of reaching out to other factions and trying to incentivize them into coming towards us. We have these policies in place, and people are welcome to look into them and investigate them. We want people to come to us. And unfortunately, it's this two-edged sword of us not having much of a media presence and much of a PR presence, and the idea that people should be able to find out these things on their own. And this is the kind of thing that we need to balance.
That seems like a good place to stop for now. Why don't we listen to our commercial?
At Forex, you're not just a client, you're family, and we treat you like it. With rates so high, you'll be glad you switched. Visit us at corex.us for a better kind of banking.
What have been some of the changes that you've seen in the New Republic?
That's one of the things that makes the New Republic interesting from my point of view. Unlike all these other factions, for example, with Hapes, you can see this clear delineation in policy from Jesse James to when Alex Tigler took over, or you have these clean-cut periods. For example, the Feline Federation, you went from Biss to Jado, and he had Rick Farlander in between, I think, where you have these different groups or different leaders who are in charge of these groups, and you have clear eras. The New Republic has this kind of rolling system of changes where we just make adjustments as we go. And that comes from the way our system works. So we have a chief of state election once a year, and in between all that, we have Senate elections twice a year. That means that you always have this split of leaders, and you've always got new people coming in and old people leaving and things like that. The New Republic is always changing in small ways, and it's quite hard to keep track of just how much it has changed in a period of time. So I like going back and looking at old forum threads and seeing people who had completely different beliefs about certain things and suddenly changing their tune. I mean, I'm one of them. When I was in the Rebel Alliance and we were going to create the New Republic by joining with Sarso, I voted against it. We had a poll, and I was about one of 6 people in the Rebel Alliance who voted against becoming the New Republic. I wanted to stay being a rebel. Now, one of the most steadfast Republicans. Imagine, I used to be anti-Senate. I am currently the longest-serving member on this present Senate. I'm about to start my 5th session as a senator. And it's because the New Republic changes, and you can make the changes you want. Under different chiefs of state, the New Republic has been a very different place. I mention every now and again that I was in the Triumvirate Coalition for a year. That was because I didn't like the chief of state we had. We had Taka, who was chief of state for 2 terms. He's our only 2-term chief of state. And I did not get on with him at all. And it got to the point where I just said, I don't want to be in the New Republic anymore. It's not the place I want to be. So I left. And then after Cheetah was killed, I came back. He was a close friend of mine, and then I've been kind of determined to keep it running ever since. I mean, I used to be this real hothead who was causing trouble everywhere, and now I'm this maverick statesman who keeps talking when he should probably shut up, but has his heart in the right place. That, I think, reflects a bit how the NR functions as a faction, and also how it reflects on its members, where the members change slowly over time. So an awful lot of the people I've heard on these other podcasts talking about the New Republic, their opinions are of the New Republic 5 years ago. And I look back at that time and think, we're not the same. Can't really say this is different now from the way it was before, because it kind of sneaks up on you. You have to look back and go, well, that's really different. Did it always look like that?
Do you think that the Jedi Order should be a part of the New Republic, like the Sith are a part of the Galactic Empire, or do you think there's some benefit to keeping the two separate?
Point number 1. You made a mistake by asking me about the Jedi Order. Point number 2, I'll actually answer your question. It makes sense for the Sith to be a part of the Galactic Empire. The whole premise of the Galactic Empire is that it is this empire created by Sith and is ruled by Sith from the top. With the New Republic in the Legends canon, it was never ruled by Jedi, and the Jedi Order are always separate from the New Republic. In that sense, it makes sense for the Jedi Order to be separate from the New Republic. To build on that, the New Republic does have its own personal force group that is entirely devoted to the New Republic. It is separate from the Jedi Order. We have a group called the Knights of the Republic. About 5 years ago, there was a diplomatic incident between the Jedi Order and a number of GA factions, and the end result was a third of the Jedi Order members breaking away from the Jedi Order and rejoining their respective factions and building up force groups there. I'm not a huge fan of the way the Jedi Order does things. They are allies, they are members of the GA, they are valued by the New Republic. The New Republic does not share the views of Senator Ghon Webb. That should maybe have been the way I started this interview. But I have issues with the Jedi Order. And in my world, the Jedi Order would be like Luke Skywalker's New Jedi Order, where it's kind of people all over the place and people are allowed to take control of their own training, and the Jedi are all over the galaxy serving in their own factions and doing things as they see fit. I'm kind of a renegade in that. The Jedi Order now is very centralized. They tried being a government for a while. They have non-force sensitive members who they try to not have them be a second class of citizen, but it's kind of how things turn out if you are non-force sensitive in the Jedi Order. It's not how I would ever want things to be. So yeah, it makes sense for the Jedi Order to be its own thing. It's difficult being a Jedi in this situation because people want to do things their own way. In the Sith, it's a bit more straightforward, where you are either a member of the Sith or you are a pretender to being a Sith, and it's quite undisputed that in order to be a Sith, you're in the Sith Order in the Galactic Empire. With the Jedi being the way they are, it's a bit more of a wash, where some people have titles recognized, other people don't have titles recognized, other people don't care if they have titles recognized. Like, I'm a self-trained Jedi Master, and I just shrug my shoulders at anyone who argues with that. Whether there's a benefit to doing things the way they are, with everything being separate, I think there is. The New Republic is all about separating control away from individual people. So having all the ships for the Galactic Alliance and in the hands of the New Republic, and having all the Jedi together, that would not work. And it would never happen that way because the Jedi would never let it happen that way. But I just conceptually, it shouldn't happen that way.
What happened to the New Republic Intelligence Service last year?
Okay. Yes. This is good. That's a good question. For people who kind of don't know or don't remember, there was a big thing just over a year ago where 3 of our former directors of New Republic Intelligence were banned for spying rule violations. This came as a result of a incident a few months before where a Black Sun member, someone who works for their Black Watch, was banned for doxing. And that's basically just building dossiers of out-of-character information that people don't need. It became this whole paper trail that led back to NRI because the Black Sun member had learned all these tricks from NRI in their previous character. They had been an NRI agent. It kind of cast a spotlight on an awful lot of governments, of which NR was the ones found to have done something wrong. We ended up getting 3 players banned. I mean, initially the Black Sun bans were a perma-ban for the person who had been compiling these dossiers, and 2 accomplices received ones of a few months, and they were brought down. And in the New Republic, we had Lucas Starr, who was a former COS. He got 6 months. We had Damon Fett, who was our current DNRI. He got 3 months, and Cara Dumont Webb, yes relation, who got 9 months. And that was all for collecting of out-of-character information. It was for abuses of IRC. It was for using software backdoors to get access to portions of sites that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. And I'm not here disputing that anything bad happened. Those were offences that did happen. And in fact, it could very well have been that there should have been more people who received bans than just those 3. It was basically just the NRIs who got punished. NRI was institutionally flawed. There was something that was built into the very framework of the way NRI worked that led to that situation. And it's something that I think is important to talk about. In confession time here, I was in NRI. I've been in NRI for 5 years. I'm not anymore, but my not being there is not related to what happened. My job never required me to do any of the things that other people received bans for, but it means that I was there witnessing it over a long period of time. Ever since then, having lost 3 people who were basically in charge of the group, I was kind of stood there going, well, how did that happen? None of these people were the kind of people who woke up every morning and said, I'm going to break the rules today. It was this incredibly unusual situation that, looking back at, I find incredibly fascinating as just this warning and a learning example that's not necessarily just relevant for the New Republic, but is something that should be looked at for the whole of the Combine. Because when it comes to punishments that come from the admins, it's often a case of you'll see a Sim News post where it will have a funny title, someone will have a ban, it will have a duration, you maybe get a short explanation. And that's basically what we got here, where for both Black Sun and New Republic, where no one ever knew solidly what had happened. I've kind of been looking at it as someone who knows a bit more than most, trying to figure out, well, yes, these people broke rules. How did that happen? How do we stop that from happening again? And that's something where I think maybe the administration does drop the ball from time to time. Sometimes they just want to punish and not prevent in future, because the whole thing is basically meant to be a scared straight tactic where people look at themselves and go, well, I've not broken any rules, so I'm good. And the problem was the NRI situation was more complicated than that. The 3 people who were banned didn't institute the policies that they were banned for following. It's quite frightening, actually. The things that people were getting banned for and doing were part of basic NRI training. They were part of the entrance exam. It wasn't a case of just 3 people got together one day and said, these are the things we're going to do to get ahead. Someone, somewhere down the line, and I tried looking. I went through the NRI archives trying to figure out who came up with this idea, who came up with these policies, where did these templates come from, and I couldn't find it. Going back several years to directors of NRI who are dead or inactive or dropped, trying to figure out who came up with these things that eventually got people banned, because this was happening for... I was in NRI for about 5 years. These things that people got banned for last year were already in place and old when I joined NRI. Someone somewhere along the line had come up with these ideas for tactics that they were going to use. When you join a new branch or a new department, when you're taking your entrance exams and things like that, you don't have your exam on one side of your computer screen and the rules for Star Wars Combine on the other. People know that there are spying rules. I imagine most people who haven't had to look at them recently don't know the full details of all of them, or don't know the full wording. Some of them are quite strange. Like, for example, the rule on doxing is written so that it only specifically prevents sharing a dossier that you have compiled about out of character information. There is nothing to prevent someone from just compiling a huge stack of irrelevant information they have no need for, but just having it on their own computer. That is not against Combine rules. If they then share it with someone else, that breaks the rules. And it's very, very strange, this idea that you would walk into a situation where it's there. NRI wasn't a new thing when I joined it. It wasn't when Luca joined it. It wasn't when Kara joined it. These things were already in place, and you just kind of assume that it's all right. You don't necessarily think that, well, these are against the rules. And I don't know whether the first person who came up with these templates said, I'm going to break the rules, and then people just forgot that it was breaking the rules, or they came up with this idea and didn't realize it, and genuinely didn't. And then it just carried on for years. It is frightening that could happen. But it did, because people just didn't put 2 and 2 together. We came so close on so many occasions to figuring out that this was wrong. I very rarely had to do profiling, and in our profile template we had a section that was just out of character information that should have set off alarm bells. And for me it did. It made me feel uncomfortable, and in every profile I ever did, I left that section blank. But I never connected my feeling uncomfortable about it with the idea that there was a rule about it. It was brought up times after I'd left NRI as well, because I in and out of the NR, that means in and out of NRI as well. Last year, we had a G infiltrator who betrayed the NR. He was an NRI agent as well. He rewrote our template, and when he was putting in this proposed revision, he asked this outer character section, is it really right to have it here? And I wasn't in NRI at the time, but the command at the time just didn't key on this at all, and it was left in. We came so close to figuring out on our own that we were doing all this. I find it so fascinating that that could happen, and probably is happening in other places for other rules in the Combine. People just don't realize that something that's part of their policy or something they do on a daily basis is actually against a rule. And it can happen like that. It can become a big deal that spreads into other factions and goes everywhere. If you look at the rules page for Star Wars Combine, it's basically user terms of service or user guidelines combined with a dungeon master's guide for Dungeons and Dragons. You have all the statistics for all the weapons, and in amongst that you've got to find the section about spying and player behavior and things like that. And I think it probably do better in the future to have a section for, player rules that are big and bold and everyone knows, and then you have the statistics for a vibroblade a bit further below it, and you can see that there's a clear difference between rules for player behavior and gameplay rules and how things function. I really just challenge people to go through those rules and just double check that everything they do on a daily basis is above board, especially people who have all these spy organizations, because an awful lot of it can verge on a line. NRI has straightened its ship, and I don't want there to be other people who are going, well, I didn't get caught, so I must be doing everything right. Chances are you could slip up, or you could slip up in other areas. And I think that there was a learning lesson that wasn't quite taken advantage of in the NRI thing. And it just resulted in people going, well, NRI is full of a bunch of people who are jerks in real life and want to steal my information. And that's not quite what happened. But it's easy to think that that's what it did, because it means you don't have to look at yourself and figure out whether maybe I'm doing something wrong as well. It was unpleasantness, but it had to happen, and I just like the idea that people could learn from it.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. We've gotten a lot of information for you. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thank you very much for having me and putting up with me.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about?
I think the most important thing that I need to say is just to reiterate my disclaimer. The opinions held and expressed in the previous interview are only possessed by Senator Ghon Webb. They do not represent the full opinions of the New Republic, the Galactic Alliance, or anyone else unfortunate enough to know me.
And with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to the Creepan podcast. See you next time.